one world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Sunday, June 3rd, 2012. Welcome to another live edition of the show. And today, as promised, I have back with me show regular white hat hacker, Mr. Winston Smith himself. Winston, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Devin.
Let's get into it because I only got you for an hour today, and I want to pick your brain on a number of topics. So I want to get, let's just hop right into the deep end. First thing, before we get into the first topic I want to cover, could you explain really quick, because you understand on the back end of things, because you do a lot of IT work for me over at Federal Jack, really quick, just the level of censorship that we've gone through cyber-wise, over I would say in the past like 2 or 3 years, it's really ramped up to where in the past year it's gotten really hardcore with attacks and everything else, and now with this newest stuff of being labeled a bad site and having viruses. So if you could just touch on that for a second and throw out to the listeners your view on it, and maybe a little bit of an explanation from your viewpoint.
Well, for the most part, the worst censorship that we had faced was from YouTube, and the way we continue to have to keep creating channels for the YouTube channel. I think that's how Federal Jack has been most attacked censorship-wise. With the recent stuff, has been labeling as a malware page and that type of stuff. I believe from what I was
Winston, do me a favor. Just speak up a little bit louder if you could.
Sure. How's it?
That's much better. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It seems that the most of the recent flagging that the site's been receiving as a site that might be infected with malware or be have viruses on it, that doesn't seem to be any type of government related censorship type deal. The like I said earlier, the worst censorship we face is from places like YouTube and Facebook that's made us had to create multiple accounts to be able to continue to get the message out. But with what seems to have happened is the site seems to have made use of some vulnerable old third-party plugins on the WordPress page, and it seems to have been attacked more because we're a high-profile, high-traffic website that the attacker would be able to spread their spam campaigns to. more efficient. Basically, the WordPress site was hacked so that in order to because it was vulnerable. That's really the only reason. It doesn't seem to have been targeted. If anything, we should be flattered because the attacker deemed our site as a high enough traffic website to warrant putting their dirty JavaScript on. And there's been a bunch of worms that are going around hitting these same plugins. If you look up listeners look up the Tim Thumb vulnerability, it's a very common vulnerability in WordPress applications that's easily exploitable. And it's a lot of times you don't know about these vulnerabilities until after their campaigns already going out exploiting them until you actually get hacked. And once you get hacked and you get some dirty JavaScript put on your page and you get blacklisted, it's harder to get off those blacklists than it is to actually clean your site of an infection or clean your site of an attack. And that's really the only reason that the site's been flagged. As of now, the site seems to be clean. There's no there doesn't seem to be any embedded iframes, and if any users experience any type of alerts or any suspicious URLs, I encourage them to email them in, send them to info@federaljack.com, and we'll check it and make sure that. Make sure that there's nothing extra on the site that shouldn't be there. Federal Jack was created from the beginning as a collaborative effort where sites run pretty much run by user submitted content. So by all means, everyone keep your eye out for things. WordPress is a program that's developed by a community of people, and these plugins are developed by all sorts of different people. So vulnerabilities come from everywhere. So if anyone experiences any weird behavior, just send it to info@federaljack.com. But as of now, everything seems to be locked down and clean, and everything's up to date.
There you go, right from the IT crew of Federal Jack itself. So it's not just me saying there are no viruses on the site. It's Winston coming here and telling you, and if you guys trust his opinion about the other things he comes on, then you ought to trust his opinion about this. I don't leave the security to my site just up to any old putz with a keyboard. And Winston has scanned the site multiple times, as have the other member of our IT crew, and neither one of them can find anything on there once they cleaned it off and fixed everything. So it's just like Winston says, once you're blacklisted, it's like, the commie blacklists back in the day. Once you're on a blacklist, that's it, you're done. And it takes forever to get it off. And apparently the Daily Paul now is going through the same thing, Winston. So I kind of wonder if the hacking is more than just somebody taking advantage of a vulnerability. I wonder if it's someone in the know taking advantage of a vulnerability. We spent enough time on that. I'm glad we covered it. I'm glad you gave your opinion and everything on it. I'm glad people heard it from you and not just me now. I appreciate that, Winston. Thank you for taking the time to cover it. Let's get on to, we got a few minutes before we go to break, so we can just start to cover it, and then we can get into it deeper on the other side. But I think it's July 9th. There's going to be, according to the FBI and the mainstream media, some massive DNS problem. But I asked you about it, and you were telling me that they're blowing this thing way out of proportion. Yes. There's in the truth community, there's always a tendency to kind of assume the worst, and most of the time, unfortunately, it's the correct assumption. But in this case, it's there's been a lot of hype circulating that the FBI is going to turn off the internet for a whole bunch for over 500,000 users, and Google is going to be watching your traffic and telling if you're infected, and then cut off your access to the internet if you're only 500,000 internet users. And what that is about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a very lucrative malware spam campaign called DNS Changer, the DNS Changer Trojan. And that was spread by a group of Estonian nationals with the sole purpose of infecting people's computers so that the ads on websites that they view are changed to ads that they control. So basically, every advertisement displayed on your computer is something the person who's infected your computer with
that they're an affiliate for. So it'll change to pharmaceutical pills or something directly that they would get paid when you click on that advertisement. And it would do this for every website you visited. So for over 500,000 infected computers, they were able to reap all the advertisement clicking revenue from it. And it was the FBI investigated this under the codename Operation Ghost Click.
All right, Winston, I'm going to cut you off right there because the break's coming up. On the other side of the break, I'll have you pick up right there. So Operation Ghost Click, ladies and gentlemen. Winston's getting into what is going to happen, quote unquote, on July 9th and how it's being blown out of proportion. I think this is an important thing to cover. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hacker Winston Smith, and he was talking about Operation Ghost Click, which was this FBI, sting to take down this bunch of hackers in Russia. And instead of me murdering the facts of the story, I'll just give the floor right back to Winston and let him get back into it. Go ahead, Winston.
The people involved in Operation Ghost Click who ended up being arrested, they were involved. They were out of Estonia, and basically just to reiterate for those who are just tuning in, the DNS changer Trojan would infect computers and change the advertisements displayed on those computers to advertisements controlled by the attacker, and that way any click from that computer would end up sending revenue to the attacker through the hijacked advertisement. And the FBI got involved because it was considered a crime to transmit code that will infect a computer, and also they considered it theft from the legitimate advertisements of the legitimate advertisers who had actually been paying for ad space on these websites that were having their space hijacked. And the way the virus would work is it would change the DNS settings on the machine, on the computer. So whenever you type www.google.com, the way your computer is able to tell what IP address is hooked to google.com is through the DNS. And what these attackers did is they would change the configuration settings on your system to connect to DNS servers they controlled. So all your traffic would be routed through their computers before it got forwarded. It would be routed through their servers before it got forwarded off to the actual website that you're visiting. And that's why it was called the DNS changer Trojan. And what it did is it infected over 500,000 machines and would make them point at servers under their control, change the advertisements on them as the traffic was forwarded on. And the FBI made arrests in November of last year. That's when they shut this whole thing down in November 2011. Did Operation Ghost Click and arrested about 6 Ukrainian nationals. And they were arrested in Estonia, and they're going to be facing extradition to the United States. And what made this seemingly ordinary cybercrime story appear within the truth community is the fact that the FBI, the way they went about actually closing this case after they made the arrest was rather different than what's usually done. Instead of changing, just shutting down the operation, the FBI changed the DNS servers. So when they raided and arrested the attackers and seized their servers, they didn't just turn them off. They replaced them with servers under the FBI's control. So these 500,000 infected machines have been routed through FBI DNS. So there's hypothetically a chance that the FBI currently is and has been watching all the traffic running through their DNS, running through their DNS. And that's not really the concern that's being floated. It should be floated now. But what's been being floated is that after July 9th, these infected users are going to have their internet taken away. But all that means is that the FBI is just going to pull the plug on their servers that they've been running since they replaced them. It's a temporary operation. They just wanted to make their arrest and kind of have so they say, a smooth transition, so that there's no disruption. And then they've been doing this media blitz, informing everyone through things like Google, like, hey, you're infected, you're connecting to these dirty servers. Just want to let you know you need to clean your computer up because you're infected. So there's the public face of it is that they switched it out to inform the users that they've been infected and to help them clean their machines. And it's very, they're doing a good deed by doing this. But on the flip side, you have over 500,000 machines that's traffic's being pumped through servers under the control of the FBI. I'm sure they're doing more with that data than just warning users about it.
Oh, dude, come on. You think the FBI is going to have all that internet traffic being directed to their servers and they're not going to open the lid and take a look at where it's going and who's doing what? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and for anyone who's listening, I'm going to post a link into the chat room. I'll read it out. I'll read it out loud to those who are in the chat room. But you can go to www.fbi.gov/news/stories/stories/malware_110911, and that will, I'm going to post it into the chat now as well. And what that will do is that shows the actual flow chart and how the FBI is made their public press release on to what their campaign is, and explains how DNS, legitimate DNS, works versus the infected DNS, and how they've made partnerships with different agencies all over the place to be able to fix this problem, and how they're doing it to help you. But in reality, the true threat is that for the last 6 months there's been 500,000 machines pumping traffic through DNS servers connected back to the FBI, and they're just recently starting to tell people, hey, you might be infected, but we've been watching you this whole time.
That's so shady. That is so shady. And I'm surprised they're not using this as an excuse to push, to extend this. But the only reason why they have this certain period of time is because there's actually a court order making them end it on July 9th. I guess that's the, 190 days or however many years, whatever, you know how it is. They usually do things in an increment of, 60 or 90. But whatever the case may be, months, years, however long they've had it redirected, I know that by court order it has to end on a certain date, which I'm sure pisses them off, Winston, because I'm sure they love having, access to all that traffic. Can you imagine you're sitting there and all of a sudden you get an email one day and it says, hey, by the way, Winston, for the past 6 months we've been, we've been redirecting the DNS through our the FBI servers, just so you know. And we haven't been watching, but for the past 6 months, all internet activity has been going through the FBI servers. Wouldn't you be a little freaked out about that right off the bat?
Yeah, that would not be information that I would be happy with receiving. And they and basically the FBI seems to have taken over someone's botnet, and hackers do that all the time. Hackers will hack another hacker and take their botnet that's under their control. The FBI just did that, but their exploit was just kicking down the doors of the server room and saying, these are our servers now, and then taking the bot herders into jail, and then they took now it's their botnet.
So they just went in with guns a-blazing and pretty much took it over, and then they used it to monitor people. Isn't that how they operate honeypots too, kind of the same way? They do things like that?
Yeah. They basically in the 7 layers of the OSI model, they attacked the physical layer. They arrested the bot herders and physically took the servers off the shelves and replaced it with their servers.
And were these servers?
That's one way to hack stuff, I guess.
Right, and of course it was all done in the name of saving everybody and saving the internet, Winston. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a break coming up. Don't go anywhere. Another 2 segments with Winston. When we come back, half hour to go, hour number 1, and then hour number 2 coming up. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. And during the break, Winston brought up a really good point. He said, I realized that they were, watching, but I guess it didn't really sink in for a second of, wow, how long they had access to all that traffic. And we were discussing, just as we were sitting there talking during the break, the two of us just realized how many people were just literally backdoor spied on for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they didn't even know it. They just get an email in their inbox. Oh, by the way, your computer, quote unquote, may be infected, and the FBI took over the servers, a year ago, and we've been redirecting it through our FBI servers. Just to let you know, can you imagine how many people just, you could have heard a pin drop in the house?
Yeah. The FBI sent out letters to ISPs late last year, and trying to inform the users with the following IP addresses that they're connecting into this malicious server. But if the user never changed it, their traffic was continuing to be pumped through there. And when initially when I was going to come on the show, I was kind of just going to come on here to kind of dismiss the concern and kind of put the kind of calm the storm that. It's just some infected machines being rerouted to a DNS server, and they're going to pull the plug on July 9th, so they're done with it, like whatever. Wait, FBI is not Geek Squad. They're going to be watching every single bit of that traffic as it gets through there. Yeah, no,
that's like how you put that. The FBI is not Geek Squad, exactly.
Yeah, and that's for that. They've been watching it. So if you're running a Windows XP machine, check your DNS settings.
All right. I mean, that's just. It's really creepy that for that long they were monitoring people. And how many people run XP because they don't want to run Windows 7, and because they know that the NSA publicly worked with Windows in development of Windows 7. So talk of backdoors and everything else. It's all backdoors. I mean, Windows, even Windows XP Service Pack 3, I think that's like the final update that they're going to do. They're going to just stop releasing updates to it. So it's, attackers are going to find vulnerabilities for it. Yeah, so you're forced to go to a higher one.
Yeah, and I mean, Windows XP has been around for over 10 years. I mean, that's a long time for an operating system. And the new stuff that's coming out, they're going to be real graphic intensive and real fancy, so you need lots of hardware to run them and make it look pretty on your nice flat screen LCDs, but they're going to have the same old issues just cooping up right again. There's going to be 64-bit versions of it.
What do you think about Palm and HP buying Palm's operating system from them and using it? They're talking about using it in their computers because I think it was like a year and a half ago now, HP told Windows to, they're not going to use them anymore, and that they're going to start using their own operating system. I don't know if they've officially gone over to it yet or what the date is for that, but have you seen anything about that, about the Palm operating system?
No, I haven't heard about that, but with any new operating system hitting the market, it's going to be a matter of the actual saturation of it versus people developing exploits for it. So if there's not a lot of people using it, it might be a piece of junk operating system full of holes, but since not enough people are using it, no one's really developing exploits for it, so it might be safer than using something like Windows. But I don't know enough about it, so I really can't comment on it one way or the other.
I wouldn't put it past them that anything that comes out at this point wouldn't have a backdoor or be corrupted in some way, shape, or form.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's all garbage unless you've seen it compile from the source and actually know what you're looking at. You're just putting bait at that point.
Yeah, I agree. All right, there's a few other things I want to get into, and we got a little bit of time left, so I want to shift gears really quick. We talked off air about the three amigos, the Stuxnet, Dooku, and now this new one. What's it called? The new virus?
The Flame
virus, Flame. That's right. what do you know about Flame, and then any updates on Stuxnet and Dooku and anything else?
Flame seems to be another class of malware that's specifically seeking to attack seemingly developed in a way that is outside the norm for your standard malware development community, and more along the lines of some kind of government agency. Again, it seeks to attack infrastructure systems in Iran. And it's the signatures and handiwork of it again point to Israeli and American intelligence sources. And recently, it's actually come out in the news, confirmed, admitted as a proud State Department moment. Like, yes, we created Stuxnet. We did it. We're proud of it. We've been doing it for a while. And when it started affecting other machines, Obama gave the official president to go ahead and say, no, this is an important thing. This is the new type of war. And so it's been a confirmed admission. Stuxnet came from the State Department and Mossad, and not necessarily Mossad, but some kind of Israeli intelligence agency. And we haven't found those direct admissions with Dooku, but the modus operandi is the same as with Flame. And what's interesting with the Flame malware is it was been circulating since 2010, and it never really got flagged within any type of antivirus industry. The official explanation is that the antivirus industry didn't notice it because it didn't use the crypting and packing or the typical obfuscation you would see on malware, so it didn't set off any flags. It didn't set off the heuristics. It's actually developed a lot like a regular enterprise business application, making use of an SQL, client-side SQL database, and all sorts of other very normal software functions. Its purpose is to simply capture keystrokes and recorded data and video and send that data off, and also attack certain things. But it operated. It operated very out in the open. So although it was somewhat hidden as malware, it installed itself to look like very legitimate system processes and never really raised any flags. Now the story that can go two ways. Either the antivirus firms are just covering themselves, saying like, we made a mistake, we need to start looking for malware like this, because they're just going to kind of make a hiding place in sight, or they were maybe kind of told, hey, don't acknowledge this one. But I don't think they could have done that for all of them, and no one was catching it, and it was circulating for quite some time. I really believe it probably was just a very, very cleverly coded piece of malware that only affected that was only targeted towards a region that which is Iran. So American users aren't ever really going to see it, and it was coded to look like legitimate system processes that would be running on Iranian computers.
Well, what's interesting with the admission of Stuxnet being created between the State Department and Israel, and then it getting released and everybody and their mother having it now. There are issues at, different nuke plants all over the United States. And you see what happened with Fukushima, where some people have questioned whether or not there was an issue because of the earthquake, or if it was something else, because the cooling systems were offline and they shouldn't have been. And some people have speculated that perhaps Stuxnet had gotten into the computers in there. So it's very important, I think, at the very least, for people to take note that they just admitted that, yeah, we did create Stuxnet. So if they created Stuxnet, chances are, even in your mind, you would say, correct or not correct, that if they created Stuxnet, chances are they created Dooku and Flame, correct? Would you say so?
I would say yes, and if it, not specifically the State Department, some other type of Western intelligence agency, the British or whoever, but all flags are pointing to the United States because we're the ones with the big cyber warfare budget right now.
Yep, and we called this type of thing months back. In fact, final segment coming up, ladies and gentlemen. We got a break, but we'll get into the warnings that Winston has given out in the past and a few other things. So stay tuned. Final segment with Winston coming up. Do not go anywhere. All right, ladies and gentlemen, final segment of the first hour of today's episode, and it is the final segment with Winston. Winston, I want to thank you very much for coming on, buddy, as always. And there's a few things that I want to get into before you leave, and one of them is the hacking threat from the Middle East. Now, right now, I believe that a lot of it is being overhyped because they are looking for reasons to, just new ways to attack. And like you said, they are admitting, the Obama administration is now admitting, yeah, we do use cyber warfare, which you called it months ago that they were going to start doing, and they'll use proxy groups, like they'll pretend to be anonymous on a lot of occasions. In fact, I just told you because you weren't even aware of this, but apparently Facebook was hacked a couple days ago, where there was a problem with it or something, and they blamed quote unquote anonymous, and anonymous released a thing saying, yeah, it wasn't us. So it just goes to show you that there's this quote unquote false flag hack attack stuff is starting to happen more and more, and you called it when it was barely in its infancy and said that this stuff was going to happen, and look out for people, not only government agencies, but look out for the the contractors that work for the government and things like that. Now, what's interesting is during the break, we were covering how right now they're kind of overblowing the threat of this hack attack from the Middle East, because the Middle East has, kid hackers, but in a few years it's going to be quite different. Now, you were a little more poignant than I was, so go ahead and get into that, Winston.
Basically we have the main type of just digital threats coming out of the Middle East towards the United States are very minimal. The United States is a greater threat to the Middle East in basically every way than they are to us right now, and for the most. Most definitely for most things, and what the Obama administration and what we've been doing for a while is we have been launching these very sophisticated attacks against the SCADA systems, like the Stuxnet virus and that type of stuff. And what we've seen against digital warfare attacks against the United States has mostly just been script kiddie, SQL injection type attacks on local county government websites. Like if you look up you can type in local county government website hacked, or you look up. There's many. If you just look up local county government website hacked or hacktivism, the hacktivism defacement, you'll see all sorts of incidents of where what look like teenagers from the Middle East are from all over the place, from Iran, from Palestine, to those Persians, Arabs, all sorts of groups from the region, even from North Africa. They'll hack a website using a very simple vulnerability like an SQL injection, post up a flag, some music, and a political message. That's about it. That's the majority of the attacks that we've seen coming from them. But we're continuing to mount these very complex attacks on them with, attacking literally their nuclear facilities and their infrastructure. And what's going to happen is 10 or so years from now, when the hackers who are doing these simple attacks against us are, working in a professional capacity within that industry or for their governments, they're going to have learned a lot just from watching what we've been doing and developing their own skill sets into their kids. So we might really have a problem somewhere down the line because we've just been poking the lion for the last 10 years.
Yeah, and we're pretty good at that. Of course, that would fit right into their paradigm of problem, reaction, solution. And, oh, look, now we really do have a monster because we helped create it. And, I'm willing to bet.
Yeah, and chances are they'll end up training a lot of them, bringing over training.
That's what I was about to say. I'm willing to bet they probably trained half of them, if not all of them.
Yep.
You know, they do it on purpose. You know, people think that this kind of stuff doesn't happen on purpose, but come on, man. If you don't think that they think in steps of 10 to 20 years ahead, because I know they do. They think in terms of the next generation and the next generation after that and after that and after that. They're not stupid. This is an agenda they have. So when it comes to this new cyber age, they're definitely trying to figure out a way to take down the internet from what we have now. They don't want what we have now. They don't want you guys to be able to do what you do and work your magic behind the scenes and, do all this. You guys have been doing some good, and I'll call it hacktivism, for years. I mean, you guys have gone after, we'll just say, you guys have made things right for certain people. And, they don't even want people to be able to do that. They don't want people to get on YouTube. They don't want people to do anything, Winston. They don't want Federal Jack to exist. They don't want, the Intel Hub or Anti-Tyranny News or any of these other alternative media outlets. They don't want any of these websites to exist. They want to, and if they do exist, they want you to have a pass for it. What do you think about that? We got a few minutes left. The EU's trying to pass this Internet ID thing where they want everybody to, no matter what, you could have 18 different YouTube channels under 18 different names, but they're all going to be linked to you, your real name, your house, phone number, birth date, social security card. What say you?
Yeah, they've been floating stuff like that for a while. Back even since the 90s, they would float ideas like, oh, what if we use your fingerprint to just log into the internet? No. That's the worst possible. I mean, it's bad enough when with things like Facebook and Google and Gmail and Yahoo, if you create an email account with your name in it, it's there forever and every correspondence is there tied to you. And if you log in and browse, everything's tied to you. And imagine centralizing all these different quote unquote cloud storage places. That's Skynet.
Well, they're building Skynet already. They want to put 30,000 drones over the United States.
It's built. It's been built.
And you and I actually talked about this the last time you came on. We discussed how they're trying to push the hacking thing, the false flag hack attacks again with, oh no, they're going to attack and hack drones and take over and start bombing people, and the terrorists could be anyone, and they stop on a picture of Anonymous. And yes, I'm talking about activism, ladies and gentlemen, with the new Call of Duty video game. And Winston came on and you talked about it last time. You talked about we talked about a little bit of the predictive programming, but hey, we got a few minutes before the end of the segment here. Any new developments on that? I know Anonymous was pretty pissed off about it, but I haven't heard anything if activism really cares, which I'm sure they really don't. But have you heard anything about that since?
I haven't heard any updates from Activision or any of the or anything beyond really what the last time we were on the show. But what is interesting is there were some SCADA attacks released on Pastebin. If listeners go to Google and just type SCADA exploit, they'll be able to see a whole bunch of new SCADA exploits that different quote unquote anonymous people are releasing into the public realm as to whether or not these are legitimate exploits being released by anonymous factions is one thing, or who is really releasing them. But they're out there, and that was just something interesting that we came across in our day-to-day research. They're more and more they're framing hackers and the internet to be bad. They're just, hackers are going to be the new terrorists. Like you said, the new Bin Laden of the future will be some 16-year-old kid in his basement, quote unquote. That's what they're trying to set up. And, they're trying to frame it that the internet is a Wild West type structure and they need to rein it in because there's too many dangers out there, and only the government can protect you. You as an informed citizen obviously are too stupid to protect yourself. You know what I mean? And that's what it seems that they're trying to set up. And if they can't do it just through fear, then they'll actually manufacture the crisis itself.
which, training the hacker, and then, or like you said, poking the Iranian bear and pissing off Iran. Meanwhile, training all these young hackers to begin with, so that in 10 years it comes back to bite us in the ass, because the people that run things really don't care about the country.
They don't even need to formally train the Iranian hackers. They just kind of need to do their research openly, and then they'll just watch it and learn. And
of course, because they know they're being watched. It's kind of like if you have a neighbor who pretends that she doesn't know you're watching her, yet she strips in front of her open window every day, and all the guys in the neighborhood watch at the same time, and she does it with the light on at night. You know what I mean? They know, she knows you're watching. Same thing. They know you're watching, so they're putting on a performance for you. And the question is, why would they want to put on this performance for these hackers and give them that information? See, that's what you have to ask. Why the performance? We got about 30 seconds. What say you, Winston?
I say just for the listeners, keep on top of looking up what type of drills are going on, if any, where the any type of cyber warfare news coming from the DoD. Just keep on, and the wired threat level and wired danger room are two good sources for information that's coming out, because they have ties directly with the government, so you can usually see into the belly of the beast through those logs. And that's all I got for now.
Well, thanks, Winston. Again, thank you for coming on. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up to the top of the hour break. Stay tuned for hour number 2. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Again, Winston, thank you for coming on the show, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 on today's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. It is June 3rd, 2012. And for hour number 2, I have a special treat for you guys. A few weeks ago, Steve Stars and I did an addendum to our Titanic episode that we did on the 100th anniversary, the April 15th, 2012 edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. You can go look it up in the archives on FederalJack.com, and you will see, if you didn't listen to it, you will hear, I should say, Steve and I cover a lot of new evidence about the sinking of the Titanic, if you're wondering why I would talk about it at all. But Steve and I, since that episode, had come across some more information, because we kept researching it, and then Steve brought to my attention a comment made by James Cameron, the filmmaker of the Titanic movie, and Cameron said that the scene of the Titanic, the wreck site, was actually a crime scene. He called the wreck site a crime scene. So I haven't had a chance to air this, and I wanted to, I've been wanting to get it on air, but I've been recovering from surgery, and I had guests lined up. So now I have some time, and I want to play this for you guys. So this is the addendum to the April 15th, 2012 Titanic show with Steve Stars. Here you go. And this is an addendum to the Titanic show that myself and Steve Stars did on the 15th of April, the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. Since then, Steve has uncovered a bunch of new information, and we decided to just record this addendum really quick to document that and to get it out to everybody so they themselves can see this information. And it does, I would say it dovetails right into what we were talking about. So go ahead, Steve. Get into the new info, and then we can touch on our theories, or we could touch on our thoughts about how this played out, perhaps, or how it could have happened, and the like. So go on.
Well, I think most of the people who watched our or listened to our presentations watch them on YouTube, of course, with video enhancement and pictures, sometimes to illustrate our points of view, Popeye, realize that when we talk about the Titanic, we are explaining to people it wasn't the iceberg that the Titanic hit that would have been the ultimate threat to the Titanic. It was the navigational course that was set to put them directly into a brick wall of floating ice out there on this ice floe. And you can see that if you go to Bob Tuscan Titanic at 5015, maybe we can post that same map. This map was used in the Titanic hearings. And what you see is this huge field of ice, this flow of ice. It's 70 miles long and about 5 to 7 miles wide. And what it is just basically a portion of the polar ice caps that have broken loose, and they're out there in the middle of the North Atlantic. This happens during warmer springs, and 1912 was certainly no exception. The Titanic would have sunk within an hour to an hour and a half, having hit that ice field just like a brick wall. It was, you know how many boilers they had lit, and they were doing, at least 22 knots. Everybody had gone to bed. Had they not, Popeye, hit the iceberg first, which was probably the hitch in the whole plan, they would have hit that ice floe. And that ice floe was a minefield of small pieces of ice that would eventually become a brick wall. You can't float a ship through an island, or a continent. You just can't do that. And that's what they were about to do. Most people don't realize that was really the real threat, because they think, gee, the Titanic just happened to get unlucky to hit this iceberg. Friends, they were headed into a brick wall of ice. And you can go to this map and you can see it. It's very, very evident when you see these things as we presented them. Now, what's really interesting, though, is that James Cameron, who I'm not a real big fan of, but he's been surprisingly candid when he writes in this article for the National Geographic. This is April 2012. Okay, it's a National Geographic. What really happened? It's a Titanic special. And Cameron is, back to talking about some of his investigations. He's actually spent, he says in this article, more time on the Titanic and underwater at 2.5 miles below the surface than Captain Smith did back when he was, the captain of the ship. So he's been out there quite a bit, and this is what he says. James Cameron says, what you're looking at is a crime scene. Now, he doesn't say like a crime scene. Okay, now I'm not trying to put words into his mouth, but he says, what you're looking at is a crime scene. But once you understand that, you really get sucked into the minutia. You want to know, how did it get like that? How did the knife wind up over here and the gun over there? Now, who knows what goes on in the mind of Cameron? But, you can think about this for a second. He's saying that
sounds like he's saying that there's more to the story than what people know. That's what it sounds like. Why would he say it's a crime scene?
Yeah, right. And that's exactly a very good point, Popeye, that, he is kind of a mysterious guy in himself, as we know. But, if he's saying something like this, he may be very subtly communicating to a lot of people that there's a lot more to the whole story than just the iceberg. And when he says that this is a crime scene, not like a crime scene, but what you're looking at is a crime scene. And now think about it this way. How's the knife winding up over here and the gun over there? We know that a portion of the hull actually broke loose underneath either water hitting the very red-hot boilers or whatever it was. It caused that portion of the hull to just blow out. But there was an explosion that literally blew a piece of the hull completely free from the Titanic. We found that. I can tell you where you can see that on the internet. But let me just finish this part here to say, when he says, how did it end up like that? The shipwreck, that means. How did the knife wind up over here and the gun over there? Think of it this way. The knife was the sharp edge that split the hull of the bow section of the Titanic and let all the water in. But the gun was what blew the guts out. Okay, that's what killed the ship, was when that center section began to collapse and tear loose, and a huge hull section came out of it. The hull section is 26 feet in the length of the ship and 97 feet across the bottom and the width. In other words, it runs the full length of the bottom of the Titanic across the width. but it's only 26 feet in length. And they found that on the bottom of the ocean. And you can see that in a Discovery Channel program that was called Answers from the Abyss, the Titanic. And you can see some of those things right there. And that's exactly what we were talking about before, Popeye, that the Titanic's hull, a whole hull section has been located on the bottom. It's been photographed. It's actually lying keel up. You can see the keel of the ship face up, and then the kind of layered waffled beams that are running underneath there. So you actually get a chance to see this piece of the ship. Now imagine this for a second. Okay, we understand there were stresses when the pressure plates began to react to the bow sinking. Of course, the Titanic's going to begin to wobble a little bit at the center portion, which we can document actually happened. Of course, we can see that in the wreck, that there were pieces of these pressure spaces inside the ship that were allowed to kind of move a little bit with the movement of the ship from bow to stern as it would head over waves and things. That's normal. But the point is simply this, that what you're seeing here is a piece of the hull that's just cut right out of the whole thing. Now, if this thing broke in half, wouldn't you think that piece of the hull would either be attached to the bow or attached to the stern? How is it all by itself? That's the question about what happened with the Titanic here. How is that piece of
causality?
Right.
The why of things. Why is that? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to pause it right there. We come back. I'll pick it up. More of the Titanic update. Me and Steve Starr. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and I'm going to pick it right up because I want to be able to fit as much as this as I can into hour number 2 for you. Here you go. More of the addendum to the April 15th, 2012 Titanic episode with myself and Steve Stars. Here you go. A piece there.
Exactly. And this is the thing that we brought up last time. Now, if the plan was to drive or just to pilot the Titanic into this ice flow, as we pointed out, which was the scripted idea from Morgan Robertson's book written 14 years earlier, The Wreck of the Titan, where they ran into an ice flow, not an iceberg, an ice flow. The ship ran up on ground, or ran basically straight up, just like you beach a boat. The thing under the speed ran up on the iceberg, spun around, rolled over, and virtually everybody was killed on the ship. Had the Titanic hit an ice flow like that, it would have been a similar accident. What they didn't expect, I believe, is that they hit the iceberg first. This caught everybody off guard, including the Californian. This wasn't part of the plan. This was that WTC-7 moment, Popeye, when something didn't go right. This was the hitch. Next thing you know, they don't know how to deal with any of this issue. Here's Captain Smith down in his quarters, when he knows that his ship is headed in a very dangerous course in the middle of the night, and he's not even on the bridge. And then they wait until after midnight before the first QCD and the telegraph are sent out. By the way, also this article does say one more thing about that, and it talks about the fact that the telegraph system apparently had a big problem, and if it weren't for the incredible abilities of both Bride and Phillips, the Marconi officers working the wireless telegraph system on the Titanic, Popeye, they wouldn't have had any communications via wireless telegraph, because that could have been sabotaged. Who knows? But the point is simply this: how does a brand new ship with a brand new telegraph system get out to sea 2 or 3 days and the telegraph system breaks down and won't work? Had they not been geeks, as this article says, that actually went around some company policy, they wouldn't have had a telegraph at all on the Titanic. It's one of the reasons why they were so busy with so many telegraphs getting caught up. But all of this is very indicative of something very wrong with this entire scenario. They had, no less than 9 warnings. The Californian, as we talked about before on some of our shows, was out there. They were shut down. They weren't going to try to get through that ice wall. They knew it was there. The Mount Temple was on the other side. They were only a few miles away from the Titanic, but on the other side of this ice, they couldn't get through it. They weren't going to come back around. They managed to get through it in the daylight, way down at the south end where it was a lot easier, and it was precarious, according to the Captain Moore that was on that ship. He said Captain Smith's course was extremely ill-advised. In other words, dangerous, foolish. So the situation is here that we're looking at a navigational error that could have only been intentional, in my thinking. There's just no way around it. And this is, as James Cameron says, in my opinion, without emphasis, a crime scene is what it really is.
It's interesting that he called it a crime scene because you and I had shown the evidence that there was at least, even if it wasn't to kill the, Isidor Straus, Guggenheim, and John Jacob Astor, at the very least, there was evidence that showed that it was an insurance job. Mm-hmm. And then when you realize that these three individuals were then invited on board the ship, J.P. Morgan got off at the very last minute, it is plausible that there were certain people on board the ship that knew to make sure that those three individuals didn't get off the ship, no matter what happened. And, of course, it was compartmentalized. And a good example of that is like Smith, where he thought that the Californian was really going to come pick him up, and Lord was going to come over, the captain of the Californian, and they were going to come over and they were going to help them out, but they didn't. And they were, it's a little weird that they were 15 miles away, sitting out there in the middle of the ocean with a bunch of blankets and sweaters and stuff. But I digress. The point is, you can see it was compartmentalized because I'm sure in what's his name, Smith's mind, he thought that they were going to come rescue, and he didn't. You don't have to have. I'm sure Smith didn't know that those three guys on board the ship were probably even targets. You know what I mean? I'm sure if that was the case where that was going on, that would be a side operation. That's how these guys work. They still operate by that playbook today, to this very day. So it's not really, you know what I mean? It's not like extending beyond belief that they could have pulled this off. Now, what I want to know, Steve, is the that big piece on the bottom. How did that happen? Everybody's going to say, Popeye, Steve, how did this happen? How did this chunk get on the bottom? If you guys are saying this thing was blown out, how are you saying? Are you saying explosives were planted on board the ship? Well, if it was the Titanic, you would probably need some sort of massive explosive force to blow the lower part of the hull out and snap the keel on a stronger ship. But if it was switched, like there's evidence to show it could have been with the Olympic, one of its sister ships, then yes, I would say that you would not need a large explosion to snap the keel because it's already under a certain amount of stress. Now, what do I mean? The Olympic was a liner like, let me redo that. The Olympic was the Titanic sister ship, and she was involved in a crash. I think it was about a year before, or could have even been maybe 6 months before the Titanic's maiden voyage and sinking. And the Olympic was also piloted by Captain Smith, and he collided with the HMS Hawk. It caused a lot of damage, and it bent the starboard prop shaft, hold the ship above and below the waterline, and the ship was uninsurable. Long story short, we've covered this, the whole insurance aspect of it. But the reason I bring all that up again is because if you have a weakened keel, which it did because it had a list to port, so the keel was bent. And it's on record that the Olympic's keel was bent. So you have metal that is twisted. That puts pressure on that. Okay, there's pressures there on everything. So they have it shored up as best they can, but now you hit this massive iceberg, right? And now they had that huge coal fire going in I think it was the number 10 bunker. You hit this iceberg. Like you said, they were probably, at least in Smith's mind, they were aiming for this large ice sheet. Now, in both cases, it's interesting because when you research the story of the insurance aspect of it, and when you research the story of even the real life account of things, and both of that one factor of it accidentally hit the iceberg that it hit. They say that's a key thing, is that they mention that it was accidental in both things. So that I find that interesting. But they're cruising along. They hit this iceberg, right? It pops because those rivets and those plates are crap. They already know this, that in cold water they're horrible from their experience. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have another break coming up. We will be right back, so stay tuned. Coming out of the break, on the other side, I will be getting right back into the clip, so stay tuned. With the Olympic, they know that those ships don't hold up too well to being smacked around and any hard forces hitting the outside of the hull of the ship. So this iceberg hits it. Pops open these plates, right? Just pops open the plates and rivets break right off, plates open up, seawater goes in. Hits that coal bunker, Steve. That coal bunker would be like one huge boiler explosion. Now, one boiler explosion by itself could cause havoc aboard the ship. Can you imagine if one of those massive coal bunkers, that whole thing, all of a sudden, that ice cold water hits that simmering hot coal? Boom! Now, interesting, there's video of a hole in the very spot that the crew member who came out, I believe it was in the 80s, he went by the nickname of Paddy the Pig, and he was supposedly a crew member on the Titanic at the time, and I think it was the 80s or the 70s, might have been even a little bit earlier. You have to go look it up. But he had talked about that the real reason the Titanic sunk was there was a massive explosion on board the ship, and it was on the port side, up towards the front, closer to the bow, by where the coal bunkers were. And he explained that the ship had hit the iceberg, the water had come in and hit the coal bunker, and there was this massive explosion, and it from this massive explosion, there was this huge hole in the front of the ship, and that's the real reason why she went down, was due to this explosion. Now, I think there's a little more to the story. Now, you could say, we could look at it with what we know now about controlled demolition stuff and say, oh, well, they put charges in there or anything, but I don't know if they put charges in there. I think, again, with the right circumstances, because the way that the ship was tweaked, and understanding the way ships are built and with the keel and the hull and everything, I really believe that with it twisted like that, you're going to have all these – well, not that I believe, I know that you're going to have all these pressures. And you have an explosion like that, I'm willing to bet it ripped loose any supports in that section. And I would love to find out if they could figure out where exactly, because most of those hull plates, I guess they probably can't tell now, it's been 100 years, but – most of those hull plates usually have numbers on them. So it would be interesting if we could figure out where exactly those hull plates came from, because if we could figure out where the explosion occurred.
We know exactly where it was. It was just forward of the engines, right in that section. There was 26 feet of, length in the bottom of the ship, and the entire width across the bottom from port to starboard, 97 feet. So you're looking at a small section, and it's just forward of the engines there. They actually show you in the video where the piece came out. And so this one piece is just blown right out, right in front of the engines is where it would be. And what's interesting also, not that I'm not a big, strong believer in the Olympic Titanic switch theory, but there's a very interesting photograph of the stern of the Titanic, which is the actual.
That's where the coal bunkers were, Steve, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would have been very strong.
The coal bunkers were right in front of the engine. So if that's where that section blew out, that would correlate with what we
the coal bunker fire.
Yeah, that there was a massive coal bunker fire on there, and that the water went in, blew it out. It blew it out enough that the keel, that weakened keel, snapped, and then once that thing snapped, that was it. And then the resulting noise that they heard later was the rest of the hull giving way as the ship got heavier and heavier and took on a little bit more water. And then without that keel there for anything, it just eventually those decks and everything are just going to rip away. Doesn't matter. Bulkheads and everything, they'll hold up for a little bit, but they're not going to be able to withstand all that twisting and torque and torsion and everything, and it's just going to...
Yeah, definitely. You know, we, as I said before, I'm not really a real strong supporter of the Olympic switch theory, but what is interesting, Popeye, and I would like to see some of this video of the engraved name Titanic. They show you the hull of the Titanic, the very back stern portion of the hull. You can still see the screws. You can still see the fin plate of the rudder. I mean, the hull of the last part of the stern, that last rounded edge of the back end of the Titanic, which is where the word Titanic was printed on the back there, you know, by the sign, stay away from the propellers. Remember that? It's back there. They've never really cleaned the rusticles off of that. Plus, they also have the bow section reasonably.
Well, that's where they found the video, was on the bow plates. Mm-hmm. I know what video you're talking about, where it does a passover and the letters for Titanic were welded to the outside of the bow plates, as opposed to they were either welded or riveted. I don't remember. I think it might have been welded, as opposed to the other ships where the White Star Line, it had a tradition of engraving the ship's name into the upper portion of the bow plates there. So it's interesting that there is video footage to back up this story that has, you know, come down through the ages. And people need to remember, this isn't stuff that somebody made up in their basement 10 or 15 years ago and Steve and I are unearthing. These stories about the sinking of the ship being shady go back right to the very sinking of the ship itself. Now, I'm not... There are certain aspects of the story with the ship, with the insurance swap thing that I'm not sure about myself, but what leads me to believe that it could be possible is this explosion and the sinking. And the reason I say that, Steve, again, is because although a massive coal bunker explosion in the Titanic would, especially in that spot, would blow that whole section of the hull out. And if you lost any section of the keel, it doesn't matter. You're done. But I have a tendency to believe that it would be much easier to do so if, or not so much maybe saying, it would be easier for it to happen, a more perfect storm scenario, if there was already that twist in the keel and there was already that tension throughout the ship, because it was already considered, quote unquote, not really fit for sailing, you know, because you got to remember, if you look at the Titanic or the Olympic, because its sister ship, when you look at the Titanic, you'll see it's three colors. It's got the white and then the black, and then the portion you don't see that sits below the waterline, Steve, is red. And when you look at schematic pictures and stuff, you'll see that. So when you look at the Titanic, you have to realize that anything in the red portion was what sat below the waterline. But when you look at a cutaway schematic, you realize that all those coal bunkers, the very top of the coal bunkers, sat even with where the waterline was. So if there was ever, this ship was designed, like if you looked at it now in modern shipping, people, they would look at it and say, oh my God, no, that's not a good idea. You know, you got to figure out something better. Not saying they wouldn't put the storage for the coal below the waterline, but they would figure out something better than the crappy plates that they had on it that popped off in the blink of an eye. And they already knew this, by the way, with the Olympic crash.
Yeah, they would have had to have known that. I mean, Edward J. Smith was the mischievous, mistaken pilot of that accident. He knew very well that all you had to do basically was to brush something with one of these ships and you could pop the rivets on the hull. So, I mean, why he's even close to any area where there's ice in this ship on the maiden voyage doesn't make any sense. You know, another interesting thing that I thought about and looked at was that there are connections between J.J. Astor and the Tsar of Russia. As a matter of fact, one of Astor's daughters, I guess it was, married one of the royal family of Tsar Nicholas II shortly thereafter, not too long. And, you know, you have to remember at the same time that the Federal Reserve was taking place and the IRS was being created in 1913, 1 year after the Titanic. And shortly after that, the Bolshevik Revolution and World War I. So, I mean, there was a lot of connections to international politics involved in the sinking of the Titanic. We've already talked about the mining people like Guggenheim and Molly Brown and other people who were on board this ship. John Jacob Astor was...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will pause it right there, and we will pick it up in the final segment of tonight's episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. The addendum to the Titanic episode. I'll finish it up with Steve Stars on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.
Working with Tesla on coming up with free electricity. Now, that didn't fit too well in the plans of J.P. Morgan and John D. Rockefeller, did it? And Thomas Edison. So they wanted to put bills, they wanted to bill people by putting meters on your electricity. They didn't want free electricity. They didn't want better power. They wanted to control the world. These were the tycoons of the Industrial Revolution who had everything at stake here. Astor just didn't fit into that crowd. He wasn't invited to Jekyll Island. He wasn't a part of that world domination of internationally issuing currency through this Rothschild Vatican banking syndrome. So, I mean, you know, he was one of those people they had to get rid of. We talked about that before. He definitely could have resisted the Federal Reserve, and he was also working on alternative energy with Nikola Tesla. So, I mean, there are very important reasons why they would want to get rid of these people, not just, an insurance deal. I mean, there's things that are bigger than that by far. So there's a lot of reasons why there would have been potentially a true crime scene, as James Cameron says at the Titanic wreck, that it actually is a criminal act. They were led to believe that, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't kill all those innocent people. Oh, really? You think they wouldn't kill innocent people to do what they want to do? Collateral damage is necessary. It's the way they escape guilt by association. I mean, no, come on, it's an accident. I mean, they wouldn't kill 1,500 people to get rid of a handful of individuals. Do you know anything about Flight 007? Do you know anything about 9/11? Do you know anything about Oklahoma City? I mean, have you seen that they kill innocent people all the time as a means as a scapegoat, as a means of avoiding any suspicion as to what they're really doing and why they're doing it? Innocent people are fodder for them. You know, they kill innocent people in wars. Who starts these things? Come on. It's absurd. You know, a lot of people would say, too, you know, when we asked the question was, you know, could Edward J. Smith actually be on a mission to follow orders to scuttle this ship? Do you know how many gravestones are in Arlington Cemetery? Do you know how many people give their lives for a cause of nationality and wars? People go off and march off in orders and get themselves killed all the time. This has been going on for, 6,000 years. So you're saying somebody won't do those kinds of things if called upon? You better think again. I mean, there are people who are dead, and there are people who've come back from these wars who will tell you, you know, we know what it's like to follow orders and to march into the valley of the shadow of death. You know, I mean, we've been there. So, you know, it's not uncommon for people who are addicted to an ideal, whether it's the American flag or whether it was the Confederate flag of the South or the Russian flag or the German flag. They don't care. I mean, if they believe in their cause, Popeye, they'll do it. You know, and so it's not uncommon for somebody to have to be on a suicide mission. It's happened over and over and over in human history.
I agree, Steve. And I'm looking at the schematic pic while we're chatting here, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking how the ship would have been going down. And if it had hit up by where the number 10 coal bunker was, which was one of the ones up in the front there, and it blows out that hole in the front. As the water starts going in, the way it's designed is it goes coal bunker, boiler, coal bunker, boiler, coal bunker, so there's sets of boilers in between each coal bunker. That would have been a chain reaction of explosions going on down. Boom, 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 boom. It would have blown those plates all along the side out, right up to the engines. And I'm sure, depending on what the situation was, there could have been somewhere along the line a massive explosion blowing out that section. So why would they cover that, though? Why wouldn't they talk about that? Because would that, see, that's why it leads me to believe that maybe it was the Olympic. Because why would they cover up the fact that there were boiler explosions that maybe blew the hull out and a section of the hull out? What's the big deal? Why wouldn't they just add that and tell you? Why would it be such a big deal to not talk about and cover it? You know what I mean? And why would that lead Cameron to make the comment he did?
Yeah, I've yet to see the video that shows anything of the name, engraved, the Titanic name engraved on either the bow, on both the starboard and port side, and the back end of the stern. I've yet to see any of that. Maybe one of our listeners out there, somebody will post that in comments so we can see that. But isn't it odd that one of the things you've never seen, at least as far as we know, or that I've seen so far, is the name Titanic on the ship. We've never seen that. We've never seen it on the bow. We've never seen it on the stern.
Well, there's video from there's that British video, that guy, I forget his name, but he put it to. There's video in there where it's, and it could be fake. I have to look at it again, but he says it's from Ballard stuff, and it looks real. It's a flyby of one of the bow, I think it's one of the bow plates, and you can see that two of the letters have fallen off, and there's an M and a P underneath engraved in the bow plate.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. And if we can find that, we'll post it for you. Yeah, because that would certainly be very indicative, damning evidence.
I'll put it in the video as a background image, as we're doing this, so people can see it as we're going through it. And I'll have the schematic going back and forth.
Cool.
You can see the schematic that I've been looking at. So cool. It's very interesting information. And again, just it dovetails with the 2-hour show that Steve and I did this year and the one that we did last year. And if you think that they wouldn't have somebody on board the ship that was told, make sure these people don't get off, please, come on. It's a simple, that's how you handle that. But it just, to me, it reeks of there was more to that insurance scam story than maybe meets the eye, because they go through this extent to cover up these explosions like that they have. And why would, I mean, I know people, there have been survivor stories if they said that they heard rumbles and stuff or booms.
Absolutely.
And shakes, and people have postulated it was probably the boilers going. But I'm surprised that no one ever thought about if that blew a hole in the bottom of the ship.
Well, we talked before about 26 feet in length of the ship, 97 feet, I believe it is, across the midsection from starboard to port side. So it's the whole section of the ship just cut out, lying face up on the bottom of the ocean. It didn't break loose. Or let's put it this way, it broke loose at 2 points. 2 points it broke loose, not just one. It's not hanging on to the bow. It's not hanging under the stern. It's lying there all by itself, way off from the ship. The whole bottom section of the ship is just broken clean out. I mean, I don't know what the answers are. There could be very good engineering, but then, of course, they tell us fire melts steel, you know what I mean? And those kinds of things as well. Office fires melt steel and bring down buildings and pulverize them to dust in 12, 15 seconds, and I guess people believe that. It's not always it's the first or second or even third engineering explanation that comes up with the answers of these things. The key thing, though, Popeye, is this. When you ask these questions, people begin to knee-jerk. You know what I mean? Somehow they start to get nervous, and their eyes begin to flitter, and they act like a pinball machine that's broken. You know what I mean? And they just start spitting out information. Oh, I guess it must be UFOs, too, and Bigfoot. You hear all that. The reality is most people cannot handle the idea of La Grande conspiracy. Okay, they don't understand that. To them, everything that is a conspiracy theory to them is just some other crazy idea. They don't connect the dots. They don't see there were reasons why they wanted to get rid of Abraham Lincoln. There was reasons why they'd want to get rid of John Jacob Astor. There were reasons why they wanted to start World War I, set up the Federal Reserve, why they wanted to, inflict a fear mentality upon the American people on 9/11 to get us into illegal wars and pass the Patriot Act. People don't connect the dots is the problem to the whole picture. And that's what we've done so much of with our historical accounts on your shows. And I really credit you and thank you for doing that, Popeye. And that is that we've shown people that there are dots to be connected here along the way. It's all a part of a big plan that's been working since I guess the Tower of Babel or whenever. It's been going on all these years, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now with recently at the show we did just recently with Radchik talking about Fukushima, we're talking about Agenda 21, we're talking about Monsanto's genetically modified seeds. We're talking about virtually the destruction of life on the face of the earth, and it's not far off, friends. They must have their own plan for their own salvation, their own little escape hatch, because they don't intend to take us, apparently, Popeye. What do you think?
No, I don't think that they intend. I think they intend to leave all of us behind like the trash that they believe we are. That's what I think, Steve.
Yeah.
So you're right. People need to educate themselves to what's going on. And wait. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end it there because we only got about a minute left. Thank you for tuning in today and listening. I'm glad I was able to play the addendum to the Titanic episode with Steve actually in its entirety, because there's only about 30 seconds, 45 seconds left, and it's just me thanking Steve, blah 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 blah. I will have that up as a separate little archive on the archive channel, but it will be part of the regular show archive, so it'll be up there within the next few days. Thank you all for tuning in. And make sure you stay tuned in because Joe Joseph's show is coming up. And guess what? I will be a guest on Joe's show. We'll be going over the Bilderberg Group, the history, some of the other secret society roundtable groups that are involved. And in hour number 2, Joe's going to have a interview with Brian Hill from USWGO.com, who's been on the ground at Bilderberg all weekend. So, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. I will see you there in a few minutes. Thank you for listening to my show. I'll see you Wednesday.